Greetings and welcome to Module 3 in our course. This module is about psychoanalytic theories in counseling. And I'm really excited to get into this module because it is the first of our study of theories. And since this is the practice and theory of counseling, obviously we're going to study quite a few theories for the rest of the semester. And psychoanalytic theory is really a foundational theory. And we'll talk a little bit more about its use in today's world. But first, let me cover what we're going to cover in the video. We're going to cover how this module relates to our course objectives in the syllabus. We're going to cover what's in D2L for this module. There's some administrative notes we're going to cover about the module assessment and about the midterm exam. And then we're going to talk about psychoanalytic therapy and the theory involved, some multicultural considerations, and then there is one of the founders that we're going to spend a little bit of extra time on in this video. And we'll wrap it up, so it shouldn't be too long, and hang in with me. First, from the syllabus, objective number 4, we're going to demonstrate the knowledge of selected psychodynamic theories. Psychoanalytical is the first one we're going to study. And leave this module hopefully with a good understanding of the founders, the basic assumptions of the theory, the key concepts, the techniques and role of the counselor, and of course the multicultural considerations involved. So getting right along with our D2L content. In D2L you have these two PowerPoint presentations, and I will probably add this very PowerPoint presentation to the D2L content as well. But you have a PowerPoint presentation on psychoanalytical theories. One thing I want to point out to you in both those two PowerPoints listed there is you should make special note to study the notes section of the PowerPoints. I have been known to pull assessment questions from those notes sections. So there's some pretty important information there, so don't overlook the notes view of the PowerPoint presentation. So Erikson's stages of development. Erik Erikson, while he didn't become a founder of a theory in psychotherapy, he certainly developed a theory of human development and growth in his 8 stages of development. So there's a PowerPoint that was actually put together by one of the students in last semester's course that I got permission to use for D2L content for this semester. So that is there in the form of a PowerPoint. Then we aren't doing as much reading. Really, we aren't doing any reading in this module except for the reading of the notes of the PowerPoint presentations. We're studying videos, and I'm breaking up the videos into different parts. You'll see that in your discussion area assignments. But you'll be seeing videos about Sigmund Freud, about Carl Jung, Erik Erikson, and Eric Berne as well. And the founder of psychoanalytic theory will be referred to mostly as Sigmund Freud. The other folks sort of left his circle, and you'll see about that in the videos that you watch. Let's talk about some administrative issues. The Module 3 assessment, not to be confused with the midterm exam. The Module 3 assessment will take place over 2 days, a 2-day period, just like the Module 2 assessment took place over a 2-day period. And the dates will be the 16th and 17th of February. If you cannot get to a computer in that 48-hour period, I will need you to email me and let me know that. It's a totally multiple choice, 20 multiple choice where you have the names that you'll run into in Module 3 to be selected from and associated with something like, for instance, free association would be associated with Sigmund Freud. So you only have 8 minutes to take the test. You should probably be able to finish in 4. So that's your Module 3 assessment. On the other hand, the midterm exam, a very different creature, in fact, will be taken on ground, and by on ground I mean at the Shared Library Testing Center on these 2 dates, February 21 and 22. And we've talked about this in previous videos and previous discussion areas and that sort of thing, emails. And I think that you all can make it. I haven't had anybody tell me that you cannot get there on one of those 2 days. What you're going to want to do is go to the testing center page of the ETSU website and be sure that you can get there within the hours that the testing center is open. I think the hours are shorter on Friday than they are on Thursday. So you're going to want to get there at least, I think their rule is that you get there at least 45 minutes before closing time in order to take an exam. The midterm exam will be 50 points and will have true, false, matching, fill in the blank, and multiple choice. And it will come from our course reserves that you studied in Module 2, the PowerPoints in both Module 1, Module 2, and Module 3, and your notes, the notes in the PowerPoints, and all of the other D2L content. So it's pretty comprehensive, 50 points. And it will also include, while we're not talking about Module 3 now, but it will also include the first week of content of Module 3, because we will be done with that by the time you get to the midterm exam time frame. So the last set of administrative notes here that I'll go over with you is the discussion forum. Thanks for your participation in the discussion forum in Module 2. In Module 3, it's going to look just a little bit different. Instead of having specific questions for each group, there's a format change to suggestions for groups to cover. So it's a little less structured than the Module 2 discussion area was. And of course, it's a 20-point opportunity for you. So with that, let's talk a little bit about psychoanalytic theory. And of course, this discussion does not take the place of your looking into the PowerPoints and the videos. This just gets you started and lays the groundwork for your study. So I'm going to quickly go through this. The importance of this psychoanalytic theory is that it's the foundation for counseling today as we know it. And it might not, in our contemporary models, look anything like someone lying on the couch and the psychotherapist listening and being the person who knows or the expert. It's nothing like that, but it does have foundational aspects in all of the theories. It has so many concepts that influence other psychotherapies that we're going to study throughout the semester. The first big thing, I think, is it introduces a role of a person's past. Now, today, some theories and therapies don't even consider the past. I mean, it's like the past is the past, and let's talk about what's in the here and now. Specifically, the solution-focused theory does that. But I think more than anything else that we use today a linkage of a person's past relative to the behavior they are displaying in the present more than we do focus on the past like psychoanalytic theory did in its original state. And then, of course, psychoanalytic theory brought around the unconscious mind. huge in Freud's time that this concept would have been introduced. So there's more about that in your videos and in your PowerPoint. It also, this theory also brought around a concept called resistance. At that time, early, back in the late 1800s, early 1900s, when this was first brought around, about, this theory, resistance was something that was very negative. And we've learned in today's counseling that resistance doesn't need to be looked at necessarily as a negative thing. It's something to be explored, something that you can tell when a client is resistant or hesitant to talk about a particular subject, that you'd want to explore that and say, I notice a hesitancy when I mention this subject that you brought up, and I'm really interested in hearing why you're hesitant about that, or just explore a little bit about how you're feeling about that particular subject. And then there is the idea of transference and the idea of countertransference. This was originated in psychoanalytic theory. And transference here simply means an idea of the client projecting something from their life, or a person from their life, onto the therapist. Countertransference then obviously is the therapist projecting someone or a role in their life onto the client. So let me give you an example. Since I'm an older therapist, someone might have an issue of transference with me as to their grandmother or their mother, and assign me the qualities, subconsciously even, of that person in their life, which really gets in the way of their own self-healing and self-work. And for me, if I were to become one with countertransference issues, I might look at my client and say, well, he reminds me so of my son or my grandson, and oh dear, and then I assign those qualities of my son or my grandson to that person. Very dangerous thing, and something to be avoided in counseling. And I think that's a good reason for counselors to be going to therapy on their own. Or if you're in supervision as a counselor, that's something that should definitely be discussed with your supervisor. So psychoanalytic theory brings those two concepts to the forefront. We actually do have some contemporary therapeutic models of psychoanalytic theory. One is the relational therapy, which is sometimes called brief analytic therapy. And it is really good in that it puts a time limit, but uses a lot of the same concepts as psychoanalytic therapy, but puts more of a time limit on it. And then there is Otto Kernberg's object relations therapy. There's notes in your PowerPoint about object relations, a very interesting therapy. I wanted to go ahead and cover with you the multicultural aspects of psychoanalytical therapy. And it was pretty hard for me to dig up more than one strength of it. Because at the time it was brought about, multicultural aspects, that fourth force had not come into being yet. So the best thing I think about it is that it approaches an intensive psychoanalysis as a part of the training for the therapist. And for the most part, these are psychiatrists that are using this kind of therapy anyway. So they are required to go through psychoanalysis as a part of their training. This helps the therapist become aware of his or her own biases, prejudices, and ethnic stereotypes. So to me, that would be a strength of it, and there are more weaknesses, I think, than there are strengths. It was originally based on an upper middle class very Eurocentric, European-centric middle class value, and really so time-consuming and costly for low-income clients. And it completely overlooks the fact that many of our problems are externally sourced. They don't come from within or from our past necessarily, or how we perceive our past. Oppression is real, and many cultures withstand oppression. Many ethnic groups withstand oppression, and that is not recognized in psychoanalytical therapy. So that would be definitely one of the weaknesses of it. One of the folks who left Sigmund Freud was Alfred Adler, and he left Freud's circle to create some new approaches in a psychology that he called individual psychology. Now, the reason I'm going through this separate thing on Alfred Adler is because of his importance to therapy. There is a whole school of therapy called Adlerian therapy. We will cover Adler more in depth in the family systems module, because his family therapy is very famous as well. But for the time being, just know that Alfred Adler brought around some new concepts that he either disagreed with Freud on or added to Freud's theories. And with Adler and Freud, but especially with Adler, you begin to notice that all of these theories, all of them, whose founders have had something happen in their lives that they then turn into this theoretical, therapeutic concept. For instance, Alfred Adler's younger brother died as they were sleeping in the same bed, and that event in his early life had a tremendous amount of impact on his later life, and his theory of individual psychology is based on the theoretical concept that early life events determine some behavior in the here and now as an adult. So the thing I would want to point out to you about Adler and about Freud and about all the founders that we study is there's a pattern here. The founder's life has something in parallel to the theoretical concepts that they initiate. Adler reframed the perspective of the past, and he actually looked at the perspective of the past as its linkage to the behavior in the here and now. He was also very, very concerned about the social interest in someone's life. And here you have a beginning of what we'll study in week 1 of module 3 to the existential psychoanalytical theory. This focus on social interest and meaning in life is so important in that existential theory, and it began with Alfred Adler, actually. So Adler would always, in his psychology or in his therapeutic theory, have questions about what's important to you in life. How do you make the meaning in your life? What gives you meaning in your life? And he also talked about clients' perception of their own inferiority. A lot of this was because he had his own perception of his own inferiority. And the recognition of how that client perceives their inferiority is used in Alfred Adler's individual psychology as a way to turn around the inferiority into strengths and reframe that, which is, also what we do in cognitive behavioral therapy. So many of Adler's concepts were initiated so early in the 1900s and then moved over into different aspects of theories to come. he also brought new techniques besides the free association and besides the therapist being the expert in the room. His family constellation, I'm sure that even today you've heard about the middle child, if you're the middle child thing. But in Adler's perspective, it was how you viewed your role in the family constellation, not necessarily that he knew something that he would assign to that middle child role. And as I mentioned before, a new technique that he espoused was the earliest childhood memory. That was really of relative importance in therapy. And this is where you begin to see a huge amount of time spent on assessment. If you want to Google Alfred Adler's lifestyle assessment and see how thorough, I mean, it takes more than one session to do this assessment with a client, and it really, really gets the therapist involved in the client's life so that there can be some of that empathetic listening and genuineness and acceptance, as Carl Rogers so well noted that we needed to have in counseling. So there you have it. Founders, basic assumptions, key concepts, techniques and role of the counselor, and the multicultural considerations. These are the things that we will be studying for each theory, and this is what you'll have in Module 3. So good luck, and have fun studying, and do well on the assessment. Thanks.